I want to introduce Delegate Nick Freitas for you. He is a combat Green Beret from Virginia in the House of Delegates. He's amassed almost 1 million followers on Instagram with videos like this.
Well, several grocery stores are leaving the city of Chicago due to excess losses associated with shoplifting. So, the mayor of Chicago has wisely announced that they're going to up their police presence and start to prosecute people for theft. I'm just kidding. They're not going to do any of that. No. They've decided the best way to address this problem is for the government to start owning grocery stores. Because who doesn't want a grocery store experience which includes the efficiency of the DMV combined with the customer service of the IRS?
All right. I want to introduce the man behind the coffee cup, Nick Freitas. Nick, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Sean. Thank you for having me on.
You know, so you've got now close to 1 million people that are following on Instagram. I think the first question I have is, how many coffee cups do you have?
I don't even know at this point.
Did you buy? Do you have to buy more? I mean, my wife is constantly telling me, get rid of this stuff. It's taking up too much. But every time I watch a video, you've got the perfect coffee cup for the message.
It's well, the thing is that was never meant to be a thing. The first couple of times I did this, I was just standing out on my front porch and with a coffee mug, and I, was being kind of a smart aleck. And then we did several more where there was no coffee mug, and people kept filling up the comments going, it doesn't hit the same without the coffee mug. Where's the coffee mug? And then people started sending me coffee mugs.
No kidding.
And so now I have quite the elaborate collection.
But just ballpark. I mean, how many? What do you have? Because I mean, every video, that's the thing. You've got the mug, and it almost like fits the message. So is it?
I would say there's probably about 30, 35 mugs, and to the point now where I think we're going to start doing our own.
So you probably should. I mean, you're in politics. You can make some money or help your campaign. When you did the first one, you were just referencing it, the sitting on your porch. Was it intentional? Were you trying to make something that, what was the goal behind it?
No, it was, I think, obviously there was that meme a while back where I think it's like Kermit the Frog taking a drink. He makes some sort of witty observation, and then it's like, but that's none of my business. And I think I had a coffee mug that was kind of funny for the thing that I was doing. And so I just figured, this will be amusing. And then it became a thing. And so yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it, actually. And like I said, we've had people send us mugs, and so we try to use those as well. Every once in a while we get sent a mug where I'm like, I really appreciate this, but this is family friendly and I'm not sure I can use it.
So the thing that's interesting is that you've been elected several terms to the House of Delegates in Virginia. And most politicians, I've been doing campaigns since the 90s, will do a video or a newsletter or whatever because they want to convey something that they're working on or doing, or, support HR 5622, the right to blah, blah, blah. Your videos aren't political, they're cultural. And it's just interesting because it's funny, the normal politician route would be, this is why I'm fighting hard for the people of Culpeper, Virginia. But you don't make it about your job as a politician as much as where we are as a society. Is that a fair read?
No, I absolutely. I think there's only really one platform where people go hardcore political all the time, and that's Twitter.
Yeah.
Or X now. And we decided early on when we started doing this, that this wasn't, I didn't want to do this as like an extension of my campaign or my political office. I just wanted to talk about things and, recognize things and make jokes every once in a while, talk a little bit about, the family or maybe the military. And there's obviously we talk about political philosophy as well, or economic policy or things of that nature. But we didn't want it to be something where it was just, another example of a politician going, oh, here I am at this, and here I am at this, and this is what I'm doing here. And again, I think people get a little bit tired of that. I think people would rather, if you are going to be a representative, and that's what we're supposed to be in our form of government, well, then people should get to know who you actually are and what you really believe. And in order to do that, you're going to have to talk about a lot more things than just the latest campaign stop you made.
So what do your colleagues in the House of Delegates think? Because as I said, I mean, the following that you have is up there with massive influencers, 1 million people on Instagram. You've got some great videos on YouTube, Why It Matter. I mean, what do they look? Do they go, you know what, maybe we should be talking about this, or how do I do it? What is the reaction when you're down there in Richmond?
It was funny. We had we had an event we were going to, is the Southern Legislators Conference. And so I'm a member of the education committee, and I was going there largely to meet with other legislators in Southern states to talk about ed policy. And so I was down there with some of my colleagues from Virginia. And as we were kind of walking around, we would have people stop me every once in a while. It's not like it was all the time or anything. I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion, but we had enough people kind of stop us on the side of the road and be like, "Hey, are you the coffee mug guy?" And so one of my colleagues, Delegate Coiner, she started teasing me about it, where it's like, what is this? I'm like, well, it's the reels that we do, it's the YouTube shorts that we do, and things like that. But the funniest thing I got, and I actually took this as a major compliment, is there was a legislator, I believe from Oklahoma, that came up to me at that event. He goes, "Hey, I follow you on social media. What are you doing here?" I'm like, I'm a state legislator.
But
he had no idea. And again, I took that as a compliment, because we didn't want to make this about, again, another politician on social media. We just wanted to talk about things that we thought were important and interesting, and take it from there. And like I said, so far that approach has served us well.
It's funny. Let me ask you about this first, but you bring in, because I do want to talk about the approach. It's a great. You don't shy away from bringing in your family to the videos. You had one where you talked about your daughter Brittany's first job and the lessons that you were trying to teach about her. Was that a conscious decision? I mean, I know I get asked a lot of times. I intentionally keep my family off of social media. I think that they're like, you want to go do it, you go do it. But we've tried to protect them growing up from, let's just call it, some of the haters. But you intentionally bring them in and talk about the lessons as a father that you've bestowed upon your children. You talk about how you interact as a husband and as a family man. What was the decision like to decide, or was it? And then how have your family reacted to all of this?
Well, we were, we've been in the House of Delegates. We've been in the Virginia State Legislature now for over 8 years, or for right around 8 years. And then we had also run for Congress as well. And so when you run for Congress, your family just kind of, by nature ends up, you take family pictures together, and you go to events together, and you're in parades together. So if you look at most of my reels, I don't put up a lot of like pictures of my family or whatnot. Like I'll reference them. Like I referenced, Lily's first job and whatnot. But I don't put a lot of pictures out there or whatnot, because I do want them to be able to do their own thing around town without having to contend with people that do disagree with me politically and can't seem to separate children from their parents when it comes to commenting on these things. But for the most part, we wanted to be able to share, again, practical stories. One of the things we try to do on that is when we're talking about a particular issue, maybe it's parenting. A lot of times it's just very simply sharing some experience that you've had. It's not even so much as just, some of it's maybe advice driven, but a lot of it is just, hey, we did this, or this is something that we learned. And I think that's a powerful way of being able to communicate with people. We also communicate, like I communicate my mistakes as well. I did this, I screwed up, and hey, I could have done this differently, but hey, there was an opportunity to have this experience or to be able to teach this lesson. And that's something that people have at least appeared to appreciate with our audience. And every once in a while they'll send in a request, hey, can you do one on I had one recently where it was a mom who's a friend of mine. She goes, hey, do you got any advice for moms, raising boys? And so that ended up being an interesting way to talk about something. And I grew up, my dad was still involved with my life, but I grew up predominantly raised by my mother. And so I was able to share some experiences with that. And that's been, again, the overall approach. And I think, when you're in politics, your family at some point is going to get brought up.
Right.
And so we try to do it in a way that's, both respectful of their privacy, but our kids like it. My my kids have been involved in some of the reels we've done, some of the shorts we've done, and they get a kick out of it.
So it's funny, going back for a second about approach. I'm convinced that one of the biggest problems Republicans have had is how we communicate messages. Sometimes they're too complicated. Sometimes they're too cerebral. They don't get at the heart. When I watch videos that you post, they're very simple messages about how we can be good people, better citizens, better parents, make common sense decisions. And they're done on social media in a very short way. And I started thinking about that in the context of this coming election. The entire House of Delegates is up. Do you think that Republicans do a good enough job of getting across the nut of the key messages that they need to?
No, we suck at it.
Yeah, I agree. No, but that's why I think it's so compelling, because you're sitting there in a way that's what I find so, like I said, that so compelling about the videos is that they're not trying to whack you in the face. You're sitting there just saying, hey, my kid came to me once and said, what's the difference between, and you're like, and as a viewer and as a father and as a citizen, you go, hey, I get that. That makes sense to me. Right. And I think too often I watch these Republican ads and hear Republican give speeches, and it's this long dissertation where I'm going, I don't know where you're going or what you're trying to convey. And I feel like we need to do more of what you're doing and less of what's coming out of, like, say, Washington, D.C.
No, I mean, I appreciate that. I think a lot of what Republicans tend to talk about tends up being a little bit esoteric at times. So we want to get, and some of it too is we come off as angry. Yeah. And I was once explaining this to somebody where it was a friend of mine, a little bit left of center, and she goes, why are you guys like you just seem so angry? I said, and I knew this, but I said, you like art, right? She goes, yeah. I said, so Monet, Van Gogh, Impressionist. She goes, oh yeah, no, I love it. I said, okay, imagine going to the Monet Museum and seeing somebody come in there and just start finger painting all over, a water lilies painted by Monet. I said, you'd be furious, right? She said, yeah. I said, not because you're an angry person, but because you would be frustrated at the destruction of something that you feel is beautiful. She said, yeah. I said, that's how we feel about the Constitution. Right. That's how we feel about our system of government, our history, or things like that, where we understand that it's not perfect, but we see something truly beautiful, and we see something truly noble about it. And when it gets torn down, or when we feel like it's being subverted, there's a righteous indignation about the destruction of something that we think is beautiful.
I see. Once again, you nailed it. I mean, but that's it, because I feel someone asked me once about my time at the White House, and I said every once in a while I looked up at the videos, because obviously in real time you don't do it. But after the fact, there were times when I was like, I said I felt like an angry leprechaun. I was just yelling at people, but it's the same thing where I looked at the thing and I go, that's just not, if I wouldn't like me sometimes. And that's the problem, is that we need to think about how we're messaging things, because more people are with us on the policies. I'm convinced of that. Whether it's the border, life, all these issues, I think we have the right message and the right policy, but we come across as like angry and mean, as opposed to inviting, because I just think people would want to be with us more, but we're not making the sale.
No, I think one of the things that I will talk to people, and look, I'm guilty of this too sometimes when I get angry and I'm just, but it's like, look, it's one thing to defend a principle, but why are you defending the principle? Well, you're defending a principle because of how you believe it affects people. Right. So defend the person, defend the people, because that's one of the issues, is that we constantly find ourselves in a situation where we're defending liberty, or we're defending free market economics, or we're defending property rights. And that's all fine. But then on the left, they always come off like they're defending a vulnerable third party that needs their assistance.
Right.
And so whenever they frame their arguments that way, what it looks like is they're defending that vulnerable third party from us. And one of the things I really emphasize is that's not true at all. In fact, we think their policies hurt the very people that they claim to be helping. And this is true across the board. And you can even, on some level, if you want to be generous, you can appreciate that, okay, I understand that they want to help somebody, but I don't think what they're doing helps. And so you point that out, right? I'm not going to sit there and you can argue for, let's take a very controversial policy right now, and that's trans youth. Well, you can sit there and argue that this is a biological argument, that what is taking place is incorrect and it's delusional and it's all these other things. You can do that. But then what does the other person do? The other person immediately steps in and goes, how dare you attack this child?
Right.
No. What I think is wrong, like, I can't imagine a scenario where a child is confused, predominantly because their hormones are going crazy as they're going through puberty and everything else they're about to start it. And all of a sudden the world stops making sense to them because of these changes. And the solution in that moment is, how do you come alongside that child and make them feel comfortable that the changes that are happening and the things that they're experiencing are normal, and that they're going to get through it, and that they should be, proud in their body, and they should know that that's the body they're supposed to have. Why would you subvert that process and say, no, instead we're going to give you a pill?
Right.
And then after the pills don't fully get it done, then we're going to start to operate on you. And by the way, we're going to make tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the medicine and the surgeries that you're going to need your entire life, because we convinced you when you were 10 that this is what you needed. Like, I'm sorry, you're not defending that small child in that moment. Right. You're not affirming their gender. You're not affirming them as a person. What you're doing is affirming dysphoria. You're affirming something that will hurt them. And no, I'm going to defend that child that is going through something that is incredibly difficult, but I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't significantly, alter their physiology or leave them with scars that they're never going to be able to correct for. And so in that situation, you've made the argument for why you think this particular course of action is wrong and why you think there is a better one, but you've done it from the proper perspective, which is, I'm trying to protect this child that is vulnerable and confused.
Right. But speaking of controversial topics, you guys are all up, as I said, in Virginia. The one of the big issues is abortion. And it seems like the message that's getting pushed down from Republicans is we need to settle on a 15-week ban. My personal belief is this. The last Democratic governor, Ralph Northam, a physician, literally said on tape that you wait for the baby to come out and then you make a decision if it's a botched abortion. That's on tape. That's not debatable. If I were a Republican running for office in a seat where this is coming up, I would put Democrats on defense and say, Democrats, this is their position. They are willing to have, abortion up through birth. They should be defending that. I feel like we're playing defense on Republicans in Virginia. What do you think that is the proper way to communicate on this issue?
Well, I think there's two things. So I carried the Born Alive Act, and that was in direct response to what Ralph Northam had done. I've carried it, I think it's 2 years now. And couldn't get a single Democrat to vote for it. The Born Alive Act. Okay, now all we're talking about, and we changed the language, we modified it, we tried to make it as narrowly focused as possible in order to say that if a child survives an attempted abortion, once they've survived, it's the obligation of the doctor to be able to provide the same amount of reasonable care they would to anybody else in an attempt to save their life. Now, nothing in that took away the parents' do not resuscitate powers, because we understand that there are situations where a child is born and it is impossible for them to live outside of the womb because of the trauma that they've experienced as a result of abortion or as a result of something else. So we made sure that provision was in there. What we didn't want is situations like, Gianna Jessen or Melissa Oden or things like that, where there's situations where a child has been just left to die while you have a conversation. It's not a question of whether or not the child can survive. And I mean, like, actually survive. I don't mean survive for a couple minutes. It's a question of, can this child actually survive? But since that wasn't the intentions, the abortion has taken place. I couldn't get one Democrat to vote for that. And in fact, I had Planned Parenthood show up and tell me what a horrible human being I was for even suggesting that this should be the law of the land, that a doctor cannot get away with that there's penalties associated with allowing that child to die on the table. And so we did. We put them on defensive with it. But there's... Planned Parenthood puts out millions of dollars for Democrats, and this has become so sacred within the mainstream Democratic Party that any sort of restriction whatsoever is just considered a complete taboo. And so we did attempt to put them on the defensive with that. What's also amazing to me is last year in the Virginia General Assembly, the Democrat House of Delegates put forward a resolution for a constitutional amendment that would have allowed for abortion up to the point of birth for any reason whatsoever. And yet I am still constantly coming under attack by Democrats telling me that when I point that out, I'm lying. I'm like, I'm not lying. Here's the resolution. This is what it was submitted. This is what it says. This is what it means. Well, you can't do that in Virginia. I didn't say you can currently do it in Virginia. I said every single Democrat in the House of Delegates advocated for this. Right. And so this is the other problem that we run in all the time now, Sean, is that we will say something is happening and we will be told that's not happening, right? Something is happening. The left comes up. No, that's not happening. Okay, well, here's the evidence that it's happening. Okay, well, how does that affect you? Why do you even care? Like, no, stop, back up. I said something was happening. You said no, it wasn't, which presumably means that you didn't think it was happening and you didn't think it would be appropriate if it was happening. Now that I've pointed out it's happening, you're saying that I'm the problem?
Right.
Or here's the other one I love. Why are you being so divisive? Let me get this straight. The act itself is not divisive, but me pointing out that the act that you said wasn't happening is actually happening, that's divisive?
The beauty is that when they have the media on their side, that they can get away with that. I want to just pivot to one thing because our time is somewhat limited.
Yeah.
There is a theory that I have. Let me posit to you and get you to react. The Democrats currently control the House of, the Senate in Virginia by 4 seats, 22-18. The House is controlled by Republicans by 3 seats, 49-46. I believe that big donors have convinced Team Youngkin, the governor, that if he can pour a bunch of money in and maintain the House of Delegates or increase the Republican lead there and take back the Democrats, take back the Senate from the Democrats, that they will convince him to run for president of the United States and as the guy that knows how to politically turn a purple state back. Do you agree with that? And how likely do you think that scenario is?
So I think I definitely think we're going to keep the House. I think we're also going to end up taking the Senate. I think it's going to be very close. I could see a 2020 tie in the Senate with Lieutenant Governor Sears breaking the tie. And it would be only, I believe, the second time in Virginia history since the 19th century that we will have had such an arrangement in Virginia. And so it would be incredible. And it would give us a couple of years to actually roll back some of the very bad policies the Democrats put in place when they were in charge for 2 years. And would that raise the governor's, I think he's already very prominent nationwide, but would raise his prominent even more? Yeah, I think it would. And I think it would for good reason. Not if he only helps swing back the Virginia legislature, but then actually makes good on the legislative and the policy promises that we've told Virginians we would do if we're, especially around things like school choice.
Right.
If he could do that, he would deserve to have this sort of prominence. Now, do I think he would run for president this election cycle? No, I don't think he would. I think he's very committed to. I think he's very committed to getting an agenda through the Commonwealth. Now, again, I don't speak for the governor. Right. I'm not claiming to speak for the governor, but I do think that he would. Yeah, if all those things took place, which I think they could. That is, we keep the House, we take the Senate, and then we push a good, sound, reasonable, conservative policies through the Virginia legislature. And we roll back some of the other really bad policies that the Democrats put in place, like tying our environmental policy to an unelected board in California, right? If we can do that, well, then yes, he's going to gain and increase national prominence, and rightfully so. But if you were to ask me today, I don't think he's going to then leave the governor's mansion in order to run for president. I think he's going to focus on getting that policy through. And then after that, I definitely think he'll have a political future beyond the governor's office. And again, if we can get all that done, gosh, rightfully so.
Exactly. Nick, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate the messages that you're putting out and the time that you've taken to share that with us. And more importantly, your commitment to making sure that we keep a Republican House in Virginia.
It's my pleasure. Thank you again, Sean.
You bet.